Howdy folks, Justin here, and welcome to the continuation of my top 6 cards for each rarity that I think are safe crafts or the best crafts coming out of the gate if you have a limited number of soul shards and stuff like that for Houses of Morrowind. We are on Epics, so let's do that. Coming in at number 6, this might be controversial. I'm going to go with Mudcrab Merchant. Here's the deal. I like Mudcrab Merchant because, like Solo Arena and Regular Arena, it gives people who are working on limited, but for a lot of reasons. But the first one is that it gives people working on a budget the opportunity to play with every card in the game. On top of that, as a neutral card, it fits in, theoretically, every deck in the game. And actually, I think Mudcrab Merchant is pretty underrated and underplayed. The hardest part is finding things you want to remove to run Mudcrab Merchant, since you're taking, it is a gamble, it is a risk, but it's a fun card, it's a pretty powerful card. Whether or not this sort of RNG is good for the game is sort of questionable. I'm not sure that I think it is, to be honest with you. But I think that Mudcrab Merchant is the kind of card that you can craft some and feel comfortable running in a variety of decks. And honestly, I think that its power level is at the same power. It's at the level that a lot of constructed competitive cards are at. It's just that traditionally Legends is such a non-RNG oriented game that stuff like this just never sees play, right? Like Moment of Clarity has a pretty strong opportunity cost in that you're dropping a 2-cost spell that does nothing. Mudcrab Merchant leaves you with a 1/3, so it's a totally reasonable card in the early game. It's probably better in mid-range or control decks, but Mudcrab Merchant is a card that is strong enough to see some play, and it's coming in at number 6 on my list of cards to craft from Epics in Houses of Morrowind. Coming in at number 5 is Hlaalu Sharpshooter. The thing about Hlaalu Sharpshooter that keeps it from going any higher than number 5 is simply that not every deck is going to be able to trigger the plot whenever it wants. But that said, if you can reliably trigger the plot, this card is incredibly powerful. I love the glow on the effects there too, by the way. But yeah, Hlaalu Sharpshooter is just a great rate. You can compare it directly to Earthbone Spinner, which for 4 magic, a 3/2, that doesn't require you to play a card before it to trigger its ability. Hlaalu Sharpshooter is just coming in better and stronger in almost every case if you can trigger it. This is the kind of card that the Hlaalu decks that are on the ladder right now are taking huge advantage of, because they're getting a bunch of 0-cost cards, and the number of cards in those colors that draw them more cards to replace them offsets the fact that they're running such cheap, low-impact individual cards. I think Hlaalu Sharpshooter is the kind of card that will see play for a long time. I think it's one that you always need to consider, and I like that it exists alongside Earthbone Spinner, because I enjoy that sort of deck-building tension, those deck-building options and flexibility that you're given when building new stuff. Sometimes Hlaalu Sharpshooter is going to be the case, sometimes Earthbone Spinner is going to be the case, and sometimes both may be the case. But Hlaalu Sharpshooter is definitely a powerful card that you should feel pretty comfortable running in a lot of lists. Coming in at number 4, we're going to stay on red. We have False Incarnate. Now, False Incarnate, and this is something that happens with both the Epics and the Legendaries. These aren't cards you're going to run in every deck. But False Incarnate makes a good case for being run in most decks. At 5/4 for 4, you're looking at a pretty reasonable stat line, pretty powerful stat line. Dropping it on curve, dropping it in the late game, it'll still be, it still demands an answer from your opponent. But that text right there is another instance of the rarely given but super appreciated red rules setting text that Strength gets sometimes. It hints at like a depth of control strategies that red can offer. And it says your opponents can't gain life. Now the truth is that this is more than likely going to just be the top of a curve in an aggro deck, or a piece of a mid-range deck that has a pretty aggressive curve out and beat down your opponent kind of strategy. But it's just a really strong card, and you can feel pretty good putting this in just about any deck. Let's say you open some Houses of Morrowind, and you don't have the Sower of Revenge from the monthly reward a year ago. False Incarnate can totally slot into that spot and perform that role pretty well. In some cases, be better. False Incarnate is a pretty strong card. I expect to see a lot of this moving forward, and obviously its power level increases depending on how prevalent life gain is in the game. So it's one of those things you need to take a look at when you're metagaming for a tournament, or if you're running into a lot of certain strategies on the ladder. Coming in at number 3, we actually have a 3-way tie, and I felt like this was the most responsible way to do this. So coming in at number 3 are 3 of the 5 Tricolor Epic cards. First off is Hand of DeGotha, followed up by Haunted Manor, and these are in no particular order, followed by DeGotha's Experiments. The reason I did it like this is obviously there's only going in a very specific deck. Hand of DeGotha probably goes in every single DeGotha deck you're ever going to build. Haunted Manor does not necessarily go in every House Lalu deck you build, and DeGotha's Experiments definitely does not go into every House Tribunal Temple deck you build, but these are very compelling cards and very good at what they do. So, I need the premium version. Hand of DeGotha with the fire in the background and the skull on his hand and the glowy eyes. Is one of the most powerful 5-drop creatures in the game. It competes with previous boss 5-drop cards like Soul of Revenge, which I mentioned just a minute ago, and Woodorc Headhunter. It's just an absolute beast. Breakthrough, Drain, and Ward is on a 5/5 for 5 incredible rate. This is the kind of card that could let a DeGotha deck potentially play nothing the first 4 turns of the game, drop a Hand of DeGotha, and proceed towards victory. I wouldn't recommend that, but it's possible, and it's happened to me when I drew the wrong half of my super greedy DeGotha deck. I do think that Hand of DeGotha is... I mean, look, it's not overpowered. The fact that you need to run it in a 3-color deck obviously limits both how often you're going to draw it, because that deck has to be at least 75 cards, and limits the number of times you're going to run into it on the ladder, because, DeGotha is just one of 15 available classes now. And unlike single-color cards or even dual-color cards, it's not showing up in any deck besides one of those 15 classes. But Hand of DeGotha is incredibly strong. The breakthrough, it can be a drawback, but the drain, ward, 5/5 for 5. This creature is just a complete package. It's one of the strongest creatures ever printed, and if you are interested in playing DeGotha, craft yourself a set of these and go nuts. This card is never bad, really. I mean, here's the thing: if it had guard, it would be too good, I think, because it's the kind of creature. Because of the ward, you already know, having guard wouldn't be a big deal. If you really need to gain some life or pressure your opponent with it, you're not trying to sneak even if you're trying to sneak this into the shadow lane type of strategies, your opponent's unlikely to be able to deal with this if you play it on curve. But as it stands, this card is just absolutely nuts, and one of the strongest cards in the entire Houses of Morrowind set. These 3 cards, by the way, are not coming in at number 3 necessarily for power level reasons, but more because of how restricted their players' access is to them, because they require those 3-color decks to work. Then we have Haunted Manor. Haunted Manor is a card that looks a little clunky, and when you're learning how to play with it, feels a little clunky, and then you kind of get the rhythm of how this card should be played, and you just start winning all your games. That is, this card, like Hand of DeGotha, would be very way above the curve if it was a 2-color card. You could put that into Assassin colors, right? And it would be the best 5-cost card in Assassin by a million miles, and it would be, super powerful. I don't think it'd be broken. Haunted Manor, on the other hand, I think would actually just be straight up broken and toxic for the game if it was a 2-color card in any of these 2-color combinations, because you need something to slow down what this is doing, and being a 3 of in a 75 slows it down versus being a 3 of in a 50, although not by a significant margin. I saw somebody do some math on that, and it's not nearly as dramatic as you might think. But anyway, Haunted Manor is incredibly powerful. Its power level is strong enough, right, that you warp your deck in order to play around the idea of having this card somewhere near turn 3. The ideal deck that's running a Haunted Manor is one that is full of small cycling creatures, some nifty plot abilities for extra utility, and an endless stream of creatures that you can attack your opponent with. And then finally, Tellvas Conscription to reload the board after, through multiple board wipes if your opponent can deal with what you're doing like that, and probably Journey to Sovngarde to do it all over again. Although Journey to Sovngarde is meta-dependent. But anyway, I digress. Haunted Manor is incredibly strong. It's also an interesting card to play with if you're interested in learning some different ways to play out each turn, learning about different ways about thinking about each turn, because Haunted Manor requires you to play a certain kind of way to maximize its effectiveness. It's just an absolutely incredibly strong card, and it's a lot of fun to play with. you can produce some pretty insane boards by turn like 5 or 6 with a Haunted Manor out, and it's pretty impressive. Finally, we have DeGotha's Experiments, which is kind of the definition of like a niche card, but this is a super, super strong card in the right shell, and sometimes totally useless and not going in every Tellvas deck. But what it does very, 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 very well. And this is how you set up just absolutely ridiculous board states with multiple Supreme Atromancers, with multiple Theranas, or whatever degenerate thing you're trying to do. There's not a lot of fair ways, if you will. That phrase that word gets thrown around a lot in card games. But there's not a lot of fair ways to use DeGotha's Experiments. Like, you're trying to do something stupid with this card, and it's a lot of fun. It's very good, very good at doing that. I've seen this card used to get additional value off Odin Nuran Necromancers, off of Giant Bats in desperate times, off of guards, off of combo pieces, off of Nixoxes, off of Laneths, off of Ancanos. I mean, you can do a whole lot of interesting stuff with this card, and it's a lot of fun to play with. But again, keeping it at number 3 is both the restriction in terms of what decks you're putting it in, and it requires a board to be good. It actually requires a reasonably significant board, because to get the Betray value, you need at least 2 creatures on the board. But yeah, I mean, like, I can't tell you not to craft this card. If you're the type of person who likes to do really dumb things once every 5-10 games, DeGotha's Experiments is exactly the kind of card you're going to have fun with. So those are the tied for number 3 spots. The next 2 aren't going to take that long because their power level is fairly obvious. Coming in at number 2 is... Sir, not appearing on my screen. Oh, wait, that's the other list. Coming in at number 2 for Epics and not Legendaries is Tellvas Magister. This card just really does it all. It's a creature without guard that offers you some defense on the board. It has ward itself, so it's difficult to remove. And at 6 Magicka, it's pretty efficiently costed. For a 5/4 with ward, you could pay 5-6. I think you could cost a 5/4 with ward at 6 Magicka and be in line with previous costs associated with ward creatures. Obviously, High King Emmerich is stronger than that, but it is a unique legendary as well. You look at stuff like Glenumbra Sorcerer, or whatever that card is, Sorceress. That's a 5/1 for 5 with ward. A 5/4 with ward is super strong. For 6 Magicka, it's totally reasonably costed. And that is this additional text. At the end of your turn, you gain a ward, which is crazy strong. This is functional life gain in blue in some ways, which is sort of brand new territory for this game. And look, you can jam this in a mid-range deck, in a control deck, and even if it has no synergy with any other card that you're running, its power level is high enough that you're going to be able to get some pretty supreme value out of it. Tellvas Magister is a very safe craft. This is a card that's going to be good until it doesn't exist for some reason. That doesn't mean I think it's going to get nerfed or anything, because I don't think it will. I think you could cost this at 7 and like nobody would blink an eye. Like, the fact that it costs 6, it's not overpowered, but it is super powerful, and it's a card that's going to frustrate people for years to come, and also save people from losing games that they would otherwise lose. So Tellvas Magister is coming in at number 2. Coming in at number 1, let me make sure that I know what I'm looking at this time, is a card that I think is crazy strong, although sort of situational and capable of blowing you out, and that is Corner Club Gambler. 3 Magicka for a 4/3 is already really good in green. You won't find comparable creature stats reliably on anything. But its ability is summon. You must discard a card, so you have to discard a card when you play Corner Club Gambler. But then at the start of your turn, you draw 2 cards, and it loses that ability. This is card draw in a color, granted, it has a lot of card draw already. But this is card draw. This is card cycling. This is card quality increase. This is potentially a combo piece if you're trying to get stuff into your discard pile. Corner Club Gambler kind of does it all, and does it for a very, very, very low Magicka cost, as well as being attached to a very strong body. This is a card that doesn't belong in every agility deck, but belongs on a lot of agility decks, way more than are probably playing it at this point. But over time, as we get more comfortable with this relatively high, complexity card, I think we're going to see a lot more of it. It is a control card. It's a mid-range card. It's an aggro card. Like, Corner Club Gambler belongs in so many decks. It's a skill testing card to be sure, but it's one of those ones kind of like Haunted Manor that you play with for a while and you get a feel for it, and then your win rate increases because you understand sort of the nuances of when it's appropriate to play and so on and so forth. It's just a really, really good card. And that is all the epics. So we will be right back with my top 6 legendaries from Houses of Morrowind. All right, so you have made it to the end. This is my top 6 legendary crafts for Houses of Morrowind. This is a power level thing. This is a meta thing. But let's just jump right in. Coming in at number 6 is none other than DeGotha himself. And now I understand there could be a lot of reactions to this. Like, you could think, DeGotha is one of the most powerful cards ever printed. Why is he only at number 6? And you'd be right, that DeGotha is one of the most powerful creatures ever printed. That's a lot of abilities. He does a lot. It's a 16-point life swing when you play him and land him and connect with him. But some of you may also be thinking, DeGotha is a 12-cost creature that I'm going to lose a lot of games holding in my hand. And it's also a 1 of into 75, and it requires you to play 1 out of 15 classes. And you are also right. That's why he's coming in at number 6, because his power level is undeniable. Like, he is a god. How can you kill a god? Such intoxicating innocence. Blah, 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 blah. But, look, it's the largest, first of all, it's the largest charge creature in the game. Except for, Shadowmare shenanigans. At an 8/8 for 12 that has Breakthrough, Charge, Drain Guard, Lethal, and Ward. I feel like the lethal is a little excessive, but... So, it is what it is. DeGotha is capable of winning you games you would otherwise not win. He's capable of giving you the opportunity to prolong games that you otherwise would just lose on the next turn. And he does that all better than almost any other card in the game. There are going to be some situations where Alduin may be more effective. There are going to be some situations where Odin may be more effective. But those are situational, and DeGotha offers a lot of flexibility that those cards don't offer, which is the immediate life gain, which is oftentimes relevant, and the ability to close out games and just kill your opponent. DeGotha does not belong in every DeGotha deck, even. This is sort of the same thing that sort of applies to Devaith's Experiments applies to DeGotha, but the raw power level of this guy is insane. I like to joke that he's so powerful, actually, that he is a power increase to Marak, because... if you're playing against a Tribunal Temple and it's at the point in the game where you can play DeGotha, it's the point in the game where your opponent can play Marak, and you may get killed with your own god, because you don't need to kill a god in order to get killed by a god. Your own god. Religion is a finicky thing. I mean, I'm not going to get into a philosophical debate here, but DeGotha is just insanely powerful and comes in at number 6 on my list. Coming in at number 5 is another Tricolor card, and that is Sun in Shadows. This is a card that I think I was talking to CVH about. Like, I'm kind of shocked it was actually printed. Not because necessarily power level, although it is very powerful, but because this is a 5-cost tutor effect. Tutor being a term from Magic the Gathering that's been used in card games since. It means find something from your deck and put it in your hand. It's only actions, but Telvanni, intelligence, agility, endurance, they have a lot of powerful actions to choose from. And the requirement that you have another creature on the board is sort of the same requirement that all but the entire Betray mechanic operates under to maximize your effectiveness with those cards. This card's absolutely nuts, though. It lets you run one-ofs and pull them out. That's... For instance, in my Telvanni deck, I run a 1-of Finish Off. It's an effect that there's some redundancy because I'm also running Leaf Lurker, so it's not like it's not an effect that I'm playing around and with that deck in general. But with Sun and Shadows, I effectively have access to 2 Finish Offs, and that is impressive for a card that I'm only running 1 copy of. Sun and Shadows power level is directly linked to the actions in your deck, but if you've got a pretty good feel for the board, Sun and Shadow is one of the ultimate reactive cards. That's the bottom line. You can also keep in mind that you don't have to shackle something you ever plan on attacking with. An ideal Sun and Shadows target may be a creature that you're going to betray later, or sacrifice to an Altar of Despair, or has guard, and you don't really care about attacking with anyway, because you're the grindiest control deck ever made. Sun and Shadows is just an incredibly powerful card. It's a card that you probably want in every Telvanni deck, and comes in at number 5. Coming in at number 4 is a first-of-its-kind type of card, and that is the Red Year. That is a beautiful premium card. So let's get out of the way first. Red Year is a kind of a combo with Ancano. Give all your actions Breakthrough. Your opponent has any creatures on the board. You can probably kill your opponent with Ancano and Red Year, although you can't play them on the same turn unless you have 18 Magicka. But the Red Year is as close as we get to a Destroy All Creatures effect in the game. 10 damage to each creature will kill almost everything. And has the added bonus of being in red, a card that doesn't really have an effect like this. It has Burn and Pillage. It has that Trial by Flame thing, but it has Burn and Pillage, which is not at all a control card. The red ear is a control card, or maybe like a kind of interesting tech choice in a DeGotha deck or something like that, a mid-range deck. You're probably not playing this in House Lalu unless you're playing a House Lalu deck like I want to play, which is a crazy control deck, but that's not generally where people go with Lalu. The red ear is just an amazing card. It's super strong. It is the kind of card that I'm glad exists. It's a unique action, so you don't need to worry about playing around this all the time if you're on the other end of the table. But look, if you're into playing control decks that run red, craft a copy of the red ear and jam it in there, because even if you kill 2 creatures with it, you're getting card advantage, and the red ear will remove just about every creature in the game. So the red ear comes in at number 4. Coming at number 3 is actually a card that I have not actually had played against me since Houses of Morrowind dropped, but I maintain is a safe craft for decks that people aren't really interested in playing right now. Not that they're not good. And that card is Amorous Keeper, which is a 4/3 for 3 that says Exalt 5, equip an Heirloom Greatsword to an Amorous Keeper. Heirloom Greatsword, if you don't remember, is a +5/+0 item that costs 6 that has Last Gasp, and that Last Gasp is put the Heirloom Greatsword into your hand. So you don't... Look, Heirloom Greatsword is good in the late game. Turn every top deck into a potential threat. It is not the kind of card that's good in every matchup. It's situationally good. And in some respects, an Amorous Keeper, its ability to give you access to an Heirloom Greatsword is even more situational, because there are going to be games that are won or lost before turn 8 when you can exalt this, or turn 9 when you can swing with it exalted. But it is still an incredibly strong and flexible card. You can play this as an aggressively costed 3-drop on turn 2, 3, or 4 and feel good about yourself and advance your agenda of going face. And you can play this on turn 8 and feel good about your agenda of going face. And in some respects, I think that an Amorous Keeper does something really well, which is give early game creatures the power to be insane top decks when you get to a stalemate sort of situation where 2 decks have similar pacing in terms of their approach to the game, and have traded effectively most of the game, and both players are on limited resources. All other things being equal, let's say between 2 assassin decks, if I'm running an Amorous Keeper, the chances of me winning, if my opponent is running the same 47 except -3 at Amorous Keeper and +3 anything else, not anything else, but most anything else, I'm favored, because I'm going to start accumulating Heirloom Greatswords, and I can turn my 3-drops, which I was using to trade and beat down in the early game, into 9 3s. And that's great. That's crazy rate. This is one of the most effectively costed exalt creatures in the game, both at its initial cost and its exalt cost. You're getting a good deal. And Amorous Keeper is the kind of card you always need to consider when building any sort of aggressive deck with blue. And I think at this point it's probably still seeing limited play because of the fact that it's a new card. It's a new legendary. You need 3 of them. It's not the card you put in most blue decks, not even just some blue decks. But an Amorous Keeper is my choice for number 3. Coming in at 1 and 2, these cards are kind of in a league of their own. And I feel comfortable recommending these to absolutely anybody. At number 2, we have Odin Nuran Necromancer. It's a 3/3 for 6. Great rate, right? But it has summon a creature from your discard pile with less power than Odin Nuran Necromancer. So, real quick, because this should be fairly obvious. Works well with rally, works well with power buffing, abilities and all that sort of stuff. Works well as just a way to grind out opponents, bringing back giant bats, bringing back word walls, bringing back the entire scout deck package, frankly. All high value options. If you Galen these back into your deck, you can bring back Odin Nuran Necromancers, and you can bring back Galen and kind of loop your deck over and over again. That is an interesting little combo. It's just a very flexible card. I've run it in a warrior deck that was kind of turbo draw its way through its entire deck. It deserves consideration every time you build a deck with endurance in it. I'm not being hyperbolic here. Like, it really is that strong of a card. It's the first card that interacts with the discard pile in such an impactful way. It's just really, really, really strong. There are a lot of ways to abuse this card, and even if you're getting a fair rate from it, and you're just bringing back an Aldvalathi Assassin, or a Lalu Sharpshooter, or a Galen, or, I'm sorry, not Galen, or an Ungolem, because you can't bring Galen back the fairway, you're getting good value. It's a good card. Finally, coming in at number 1 is what I think is by a fairly significant margin, the most powerful legendary in House of Morrowind. And that is Genius Path Mage. Genius Path Mage is a 6 magic of 4/4 that if you have ever seen the Nixox combo deck go off before it was nerfed last week, you probably have run into, because it was an integral part in why that deck was so effective and so consistent. There are a lot of ways to use this card that don't involve Nixox. Its ability, summon a random creature from your deck with cost equal to your current magicka, is in some ways very reminiscent of Altar, and that, like Altar of Despair, in that you need to keep pretty good track of what's actually in your deck in order to maximize this card's playability. But if you have that sort of information available and you understand what your deck is capable of and what it needs in a certain situation, manipulating your magicka so that you can play Genius Path Mage at the right time for the right effect is incredibly powerful. We just talked about how Sun and Shadows was a card I was surprised was printed because of its ability to tutor up actions. That's a unique legendary card that can only be played in 1 3-color house, one of the 15 classes in the game. Genius Path Mage can be played in anything that runs intelligence, which is a lot of different classes. Genius Path Mage is just crazy, crazy good. If you've never played with Altar of Despair, like, building a good altar chain, and knowing how your altar chain is going to work and preparing for everything that you're going to pull out from it can mean the difference between victory and loss when playing an altar deck. Genius Path Mage gives you that same kind of experience, albeit a different experience, but a similar kind of experience in a single card. Honestly, the Genius Path Mage is just so significantly more powerful, I think, than every other legendary in this set, because of what it's capable of doing and the consistency it adds to your decks, that I feel no hesitation whatsoever recommending people craft Genius Path Mage. Play around with it, learn to play around with it, build decks that rely on its ability to do certain silly things. Never forget that if you pull it out of an altar and you have 6 magicka available, you're going to pull out all the copies of Genius Path Mage in your deck if it's the only 6-cost creature in your deck. It's a lot of fun to play with. I think that anytime I have the opportunity to, I'm going to. And I feel like it is the number 1 safe craft pick for Houses of Morrowind. That's been my list. The last part in this sort of talking series about crafting Houses of Morrowind cards is going to be a look at cards I think are underrated and underplayed. I touched on some here, but there's also some very, 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 like, kind of esoteric cards that I'm going to be looking at in that video. In the meantime, I just finished my semester of grad school. Sandra and I went out on a date the other night. Life is good. And we are getting married 3 weeks from today. So I have a pretty busy schedule here for May. Although, because my semester is over, I have more time than I did before. That is it. Thank you for joining me. And then don't forget to tune in to part 3 of my crafting series whenever the hell I finish filming it. Bye-bye.